It's not just the poor that are suffering. The middle class, and when we take the percentage of the population in the middle that considers themselves middle class, have lost from 1 week to 2 weeks of salary. So right across the country, we see that most Canadians are better off since the signing of the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement. They're actually worse off. And those figures haven't even been compiled and published by our government, so that we can actually take a look at it and say, and determine whether or not these agreements are in our interest. So those are the myths that serve as the foundation of the SPP. The SPP is 300 different areas of negotiations, and here's our 10 reasons why we oppose the process. First, there is no public consultation and no democratic vote. This is something that has been done expressly. The Liberals set it up this way because they understand that the actual quote from the bureaucrats and the members of the Canadian Council of Chief Executives who support the process is that the Canadian public is not ready to have a discussion around the SPP, and that's why these negotiations are taking place behind closed doors. The NDP says it's time to get it out from behind closed doors. It's time to have public consultations that are real, and it's time to have a parliamentary vote on this process before it goes any further. Second reason, 300 different areas, all areas of public policy, being negotiated behind closed doors. Third, the tip of the iceberg, what we have learned from the SPP is in areas like pesticides, what we are looking for is the lowest possible standard. This was announced in the spring. The Harper government said that because the pesticide residue regulations that we have in Canada, we have a much higher level of protection for Canadians, so we allow a far lower amount of pesticides on Canadian food. Because the higher standards were a trade impediment, they were going to move to lower American standards. Now, we know that pesticides have a direct relationship to such diseases as Parkinson's disease, and yet our government is moving to lower those standards. Now, we take reason number 2, 300 different areas. We take the kind of compelling public health policy that is affected by this, pesticide residue, and we can see that this is clearly not in Canadian interests. Fourth, the no-fly list and other security processes that are being put in place by the Americans are being simply foisted on Canada. And we've had Joe Martin, NDP justice critic, who has been has led a vehement fight against the imposition of the no-fly list. The no-fly list essentially criminalizes innocent Canadians before they even board Canadian flights. And this and the entire security agenda is being adopted essentially wholesale into Canada. Fifth reason, as I mentioned, there is no prosperity involved in this prosperity partnership. Essentially, what it is a hollowing out of the Canadian population. Essentially, most Canadian families are earning less. In fact, we have the same level, or approaching the same levels of income inequality that we saw in the 1930s. So we are seeing an increasing hollowing out, most Canadian families' income going down, the wealthiest of Canadian families' income going up. No prosperity is assured by this agenda. Sixth, bulk water exports and water diversions are very clearly part of the negotiating process. What we have seen from documents that have come to light through the Council of Canadians and through our own work in the NDP caucus is that there is ongoing consultations through third parties to consult about the advisability of bulk water exports and water diversions. We know that that is bad news for the environment. We know that that is bad news for Canada. Canada has, if you like, a large bank, a bank account of freshwater resources. We have about 20% of our freshwater resources in storage, if you like. But the actual amount of freshwater renewable resources is about 6%. And we know the environmental impact if we start diverting our waters down to the United States. And yet this is a very real concern and something that the NDP has been fighting in the House of Commons. Seventh, Areas of safety, food safety, air safety, we're pushing down standards. The NDP has fought back on some of the transportation initiatives, and what we're trying to do is simply maintain the kind of higher standards that Canada has, but also push them to an even higher standard. What essentially the SPP does is lower those standards. 8, energy sovereignty and security. We forced this spring the first hearings on the SPP in the Canadian Parliament, and Gordon Laxer, who is a very articulate Albertan representing the Parkland Institute, came forward to talk about what the impact was of the SPP on our energy resources. We are already compelled through NAFTA to share our energy resources, oil and gas resources, with the United States prior to supplying the Canadian market. In a very real sense, if there is a supply crisis, Canadians will freeze in the dark while we are obliged to supply the American market first. What Gordon Laxer pointed to in his testimony is that what is left of our energy sovereignty would disappear under the SPP. 9th, we've seen with the softwood sellout how in areas of forestry policy, Canadians have to go to Washington now to get approval for any changes that we make. This would be widespread. Whether we're talking about regulatory changes, our energy sovereignty, or water, it would be Canadians going to Washington to try to lobby to use our resources, to make our decisions. And that really brings us to the 10th reason why we're opposing this agenda. The very future of our country is at stake. So what has the NDP been doing? We're starting, as Paul Doer said tonight, a national tour that will be going right through the fall, going to every region of the country. More importantly, we are continuing the process of public education to move this from an activist issue to an issue that all Canadians are concerned about. Every single NDP MP at the committee level is fighting to push back this agenda. And most importantly, this fall, the NDP, as soon as Parliament reconvenes, will be bringing forward motions to push the Harper government to stop this process until Parliament can take a vote, until there is meaningful public participation and consultation, and until the entire agenda is exposed so that we can talk about what exactly is happening and what is at stake for the future of our country. We will not stop until we stop this agenda, and we look forward to having your help in this fight for Canada's future. Thank you.